If that song spooks you during a late night drive, welcome to the gang, Jeepers Creepers lovers. Jeepers Creepers started its journey in 2001, and horror lovers added another name to their list of favorite supernatural serial killers. I remember catching Jeepers Creepers first on the TV and was blown away by the makers' crafted anticipation and horror in every scene. Not to mention, they also sneaked a mythological aspect into the Creepers' existence. And with some really clever camera work, the movie went on to become a sleeper hit and spawned a franchise. Remember the last shot, where the Creeper stares straight through Danny's hollowed-out face, almost making it feel like he's staring right back at us? Yes, right at that moment, we knew that this monster was definitely coming back. And boy, were we right. In 2003, the same director released the second installment, but sadly, it didn't have the scares of the original. Yet it managed to thrive well within the genre's boundaries, and scenes like this convinced us for yet another ride. But wait, where did the third part go? We kept on waiting, and our siblings grew older to join that wait list, but there was no sign of the Creeper waking up. Finally, the Creeper hit the screen with his bat wings in 2017, but over a decade of hope was shattered by the poor writing and cheap CGI. But hey, Hollywood can't let a franchise die easily, so they churned out a reboot, Jeepers Creepers Reborn, in 2022. And let's just say, it would have been better if they had accepted defeat with the negative results of the third film, because we sure didn't deserve seeing the film series come to a point where people upped and left the theater in just half an hour. That hurt, man. But what actually went wrong? I mean, Jeepers Creepers started going downhill with each installment, but truth be told, the story had potential. So, how did the makers mess this up? Well, that's my job here today, to find out why the Creeper keeps trying to wake up in Hollywood, only for the franchise to get buried again and again. The first film gave horror fans a new monster to fear. Writer and director Victor Salva shared in an interview that the beginning was based on a real story. Salva stated, "I was told, only it was an elderly couple, and they went back to this pipe to see what he was throwing down there. I thought that was a tremendously brave thing to do, but I also remember when I heard it thinking, if that was a movie, if they went back, I would be on the edge of my seat." Now, Salva himself has not confirmed the Dennis Depew connection, but many horror outlets and fans have pointed out how closely the opening echoes the 1990 Michigan case involving Dennis Depew and the murder of his wife. Salva then borrowed elements from films like Duel and Night of the Living Dead and put them together with a Hitchcockian suspense style to give us Jeepers Creepers in 2001. And yes, he gave us something fresh. Most importantly, the film played with the final girl expectation by making us believe Trish was the obvious target, only to twist the knife by taking Derry instead. Moreover, he wanted the Creeper to kill mostly male characters because he was tired of seeing women assaulted and slaughtered in cinema. As a result, this story about siblings Derry and Trish living the worst night of their life and fighting against something which they slowly realized was not human went on to become a cult classic and a commercial success. Yes, critics were mixed on the film, but audiences still helped turn it into a profitable sleeper hit. And over time, horror fans gave the Creeper a life that the reviews never fully predicted. The movie made nearly 6 times its reported $10 million budget, pulling in around $59 million worldwide. And let me tell you why moviegoers gradually fell in love with Jeepers Creepers 1. Firstly, as I said, the true story connection, though unofficial, sparked our interests, and what Salva did was give us a simple story. A story about the connection and love between two siblings who came off as utterly relatable with their typical brother-sister banter. So Derry and Trish were driving back to their home during spring break when they had the ill fate of encountering the Creeper. Curiosity got the better of Derry, who went spooning around in the creature's lair and realized what they were up against. Well, not fully yet. Enter a psychic and the police, who got brutally killed, and the slow revelation of the Creeper being an inhuman thing. The premise is basic. The sibling duo run for their lives lives from the Creeper, unearthing facts about him, and for all of us who scream, "Hit him just one more time just to be sure," Trish really did so. She drove over the Creeper thrice to make sure he was dead. But of course, in the end, they realized that he didn't play by human rules of life and death. The movie ended with the Creeper taking Derry away and killing him, leaving our hearts heavy for Trish and yearning for more of the Creeper's chaos. Yes, it was a movie that leaned heavily into slasher horror style, but Salva managed to maneuver his way around the stereotypes and gave us something more character-driven. Now, that was kinda new if you think about movies like Friday the 13th. I am a huge fan of Jason, but everyone who ever got cast in the films knew they were just going to be used as a puppet for Jason to show off his killing moves. But Jeepers Creepers? It had a clear narrative and gave audiences enough breathing space between kills. On top of that, the creator did a brilliant job of bringing the Creeper to life by primarily using practical effects, prosthetics, heavy costumes, and detailed makeup. Salva kept CGI use to a minimum, and as I always say, I am a huge sucker for practical effects. And this old-school filmmaking technique of Salva's is one of the strongest reasons Jeepers Creepers 1 still hits a sweet spot. By the conclusion of the first film, we had collected the necessary information. The Creeper is a monster who wakes up every 23 years and hunts for 23 days. It consumes human body parts, which are intended for its own survival and regeneration. Of course, the lore deepens in the later movies, and as a matter of fact, the Creeper's appearance too kept on changing. After the first movie's financial achievements, Salva penned a direct sequel. But wait, while on the one hand, the Creeper was rising as the new horror icon and Jeepers Creepers was becoming a pop culture phenomenon, on the other hand, Victor Salva's controversial history began overshadowing the film. Victor Salva's criminal past started haunting the franchise. Yes, there is a horrible truth about Victor Salva. Salva is a registered child molester who was sentenced to a correctional facility in Soledad in 1988. He was 30 and was accused of having relations with a 12-year-old Concord boy who starred in his first low-budget horror film. The man pleaded guilty to lewd conduct, including having with a person under 14 and even procuring a child. He was sentenced to 3 years in state prison in 1988, with reports differing slightly on the exact time served, commonly listed as around 15 to 19 months. And 6 years later, he tried to enter Hollywood with the release of a Walt Disney-produced sci-fi film, Powder. However, his past soon caught up with him, and a Los Angeles headline read, "Disney's movie director is a convicted After the story resurfaced around Powder, Disney publicly distanced itself from Salva, while the controversy led to protests and renewed coverage of his conviction. Victor Salva again tried to return with an independently financed thriller named Rites of Passage, and through his work, Salva slowly asked for forgiveness. However, when Jeepers Creepers hit the screens, people could not help but wonder how much of Salva he had put into the movie. See, the thing is, with people like Victor Salva, it's extremely hard to see their movies and not find connections. As a result, many viewers linked the Creeper as an unapologetic personification of Salva's inner demons and believed that he took it a notch higher in Jeepers Creepers 2. The second movie is from where Jeepers Creepers' downfall started, and if you really think about certain parts, you'd understand how Victor Salva brought it on himself. He destroyed something he himself created. I'll get into why Jeepers Creepers 2 was a disappointment, but as for Salva's twisted approach, it was palpable, starting with the abduction of a young boy to tormenting trapped teenagers in the bus, where the Creeper looked at the jocks with an almost gaze. Well, it's undeniable. And the writing? Holy crap. Why would someone write stuff like, "We all saw the way he sniffed you out back there, man. He wants you. He even gave you some tongue action, and we all see it." Yikes. Apart from the uncomfortable real-world shadow hanging over Salva, Jeepers Creepers 2 was also where many viewers felt the franchise started losing the eerie control of the original. I mean, yes, it made money, and if we don't think much about what Victor Salva has done in his life, it's an entertaining watch. I mean, it's like, if you want to have brain rot fun with your friends, Jeepers Creepers 2 will deliver. It has that teenage campy fun, which is a good choice once in a while. Let me tell you why. Jeepers Creepers 2 expanded the monster but lost the mystery. The story picks up after we saw the Creeper hunt down Derry and indicates the winged demon's time is running out and his 23 days are nearly up. So if he wants to get himself a new liver or kneecap, he has to hurry. and he started right off. The creeper first carried away and ate the son of a farmer, Jack Taggart, who, overwhelmed with grief, tasked his elder son to kill the creature no matter what. The other part of the story throws us among a group of football players and cheerleaders who also turned out to be as luckless as the Jenner siblings and ended up being on the Creepers hit list. In short, Jeepers Creepers 2 had a lot going on for a sequel, and with an expanded budget, Salva had clearly upped the stakes. While the first film played out like a constantly evolving campfire story and moved from a highway stalker setup into a full-blown creature feature, this one put the creeper out in the open. This narrative shift also ensured quicker pacing and more action sequences. Coming to performances, the growth of Jonathan Breck's flesh-eating villain was easily one of the most enjoyable parts, as he had traded his rusty truck for a more hands-on approach. Since he's on a deadline this time, the creeper doesn't mess around with all the theatrical stuff from before, and you can look at the first film as him playing with his food, while in the second one, he is at work. The sequel also expanded the creeper's lore quite a bit, giving him new weapons and strange abilities. I'll never get over that extra nostril. All that being said, Jeepers Creepers 2 messed up when it came to writing and using CGI, and as a decent horror movie, it did make money, but Salva's directorial flaws had started surfacing, and they were pretty prominent to ignore. For starters, the sequel expects casual viewers to keep track of the timeline without much hand-holding. Derry's dreamlike appearance can confuse people at first, but officially, the second film takes place only days after the first, near the end of the creeper's 23-day feeding cycle. The film never bothers to make it clear and ignores several other points that needed exploration from the first one. The 2001 movie set a framework about how the creeper actually worked. It picked its victims based on what it wanted from them, meaning he smelled something specific, eyes, limbs, whatever, and chose accordingly. But here, the script leans much harder into the idea that the creeper can smell fear, while still keeping the body part hunting logic from the first movie. That's not impossible, but the sequel explains it so loosely, Salva probably lost the memo himself, and it felt like the rules just changed because the script needed them to. Now, the one good thing which I mentioned was the creeper getting down to business without beating about the bush, but it turns out many audiences actually missed the mystery of the original. I do understand that. There was a different kind of excitement in trying to figure out what this thing was and why it was dumping bodies down a pipe, whether it was even human, and how it could be stopped. But Salva ditched it for a whole lot of noisy and quarreling youngsters. Personally, what bothers me the most is how Victor Salva tried to pull a lifeboat stunt like Hitchcock and shamefully failed. I mean, when you have the gall to compare your film to that of Alfred Hitchcock, you have to have strong acting and tight dialogue to sail that boat. And this film had neither of those. Within minutes, it becomes obvious that half the cast is overacting, while the other half looks completely lost, trying to deliver some terrible lines. Roger Ebert, writing for the Chicago Sun-Times, rated the film 1 out of 4 stars and said, Victor Salva's Jeepers Creepers 2 supplies us with a first-class creature, a fourth-rate story, and dialogue possibly created by feeding the screenplay into a pasta maker. And even as a fan of the first flick, I have to agree with him. Jeepers Creepers 2 ended with Jack observing the creeper with a harpoon, which meant a third follow-up was clearly on the table. And those of us who enjoy slasher panic were actually looking forward to it. The third film got trapped in development hell. Within 3 years, the third film was finally announced, titled Jeepers Creepers 3: The Creeper Walks Among Us. MGM reportedly considered a direct-to-DVD route, but the bigger problem was financing and rights compilations, which kept the third movie stuck in development for years. Salva even wrote the script for it, and Gina Phillips was set to return as Trish, but the film was stuck in development hell for more than a decade, with false starts, title changes, and production delays dragging the Creeper's return into 2017. Salva's original idea was to make Jeepers Creepers 3 23 years after the first 2 films. Yeah, that got chucked out. But what's worse is that Salva faced many setbacks during the production of Jeepers Creepers 3. In 2011, the cameras almost rolled, and Salva said, MGM has had its share of troubles since the first 2 Jeepers Creepers films came out of United Artists under the Lions umbrella, and that complicated getting J. DC3, we call it Jeepers Threepers, made as well, but it can be made without MGM. MGM doesn't own the Jeepers franchise. Francis Coppola's Zoetrope owns it, and I think this might actually be the year the film gets made. I hope it is. The third installment has lots of goodies for the Jeepers fans, and they have been so loyal and so patient. But right when Jeepers Creepers 3 was about to see the light of day and the team was ready to start filming in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canadian talent agencies were warned after the Union of British Columbia Performers drew attention to Salva's conviction and reminded performers that they had the right to refuse work they believed was unsafe. The statement read, "It has recently come to our attention that a casting breakdown has gone out for a feature film entitled Jeepers Creepers 3, and that the director of the film, Victor Salva, was convicted of sexual misconduct in 1988. The conviction allegedly resulted from misconduct involving a minor whom Mr. Salva was directing at the time. At this time, we would like to remind our members and their agents that under Article A2702, Safety and Welfare of a Minor, of the BC Master Production Agreement, a performer has the right to refuse work if they believe that the nature of the work is unsafe." After that, the casting calls were pulled down. Production was stopped, but producer Stan Spry assured a fan on Twitter that the film had not been canceled. The movie finally managed to make it into theaters in 2017, and Phillips only appeared for a cameo. But guess what? Its theatrical life was basically an event release. It played on September 26th, 2017, got an added encore screening on October 4th, and then moved on to home media and later TV. So for many viewers, Jeepers Creepers 3 felt less like a major theatrical comeback and more like something they eventually caught at home. But oh boy, I don't think any film has been a bigger disappointment and disservice to fans than Jeepers Creepers 3. If you spared yourself from the horror, let me quickly update you on the premise. It picks up right after the first film, with the police finding the Creepers' truck full of bodies, only to realize it had been set up with deadly traps. Sergeant Davis Tubbs puts together a team to finally take the Creeper down once and for all, but as they try to move it, the Creeper returns and starts doing Creeper things. Pretty basic stuff. Oh wait, it's not basic yet for Jeepers Creepers, so they put in a psychic, Galen, the mother of Kenny Brandon, a past Creeper victim whose death becomes part of the film's attempt to deepen the Creeper's mythology, and a bunch of teenagers. Of course. Yeah, now it sounds like Jeepers Creepers. And of course, the movie followed with a whole lot of kills and failed attempts to expand the Creeper's legend. What on earth was that mysterious hand thing doing in the film? Salva couldn't manage to answer it, but he did manage to sneak in the possibility of a sequel. At this point, I'm not sure if that's optimism or audacity. Firstly, there is no way this should be counted as Jeepers Creepers 3. I mean, it was more like Jeepers Creepers 1.5. And what makes me furious to this day is Salva claimed that Jeepers Creepers 3 was supposed to be the scariest of them all. Scary? Calm down. For me, Jeepers Creepers 3 has almost no redeeming qualities outside the basic nostalgia of seeing the Creeper again. The movie was set in broad daylight, which removed any chances of it having suspense or jump scares. Several critics and horror reviewers hit the film for its weak effects and flat presentation, and the heavy daytime settings only made those problems feel more exposed. You know, you could still make it work if there was a good enough plot and performances, but the whole thing was a train wreck. Salva tried to juggle too many things together, which hindered the building of a strong narrative, and the story kept on jumping randomly from one point to another. The Creeper's kind of intimidating, but as a fan of the first film, and having somewhat accepted the second one, the most frustrating part is how much focus is put on the Creeper's truck instead of the Creeper itself. The truck was never supposed to be the main attraction. At one point, it even starts to feel less like a horror film and more like a superhero movie with a creepmobile. Now, here is where the controversy around the film got even uglier. Critics singled out a removed line that appeared to make light of abuse, which felt especially disturbing given Salva's criminal history. Yes, one criticized line reportedly said, "Can you blame him though? I mean, look at her. The heart wants what it wants." Am I right? Yuck. That line was reportedly removed from the theatrical cut, but it appeared in the version screened for critics, which made the backlash even louder. But Salva was so in his own head that he apparently had the guts to pitch a fourth film. Gina Phillips had spilled in an interview with Diabolique magazine in 2017, Victor has written what happens from the second after the conclusion of Jeepers Creepers 3. I think that's all I'm allowed to say about it, but he wrote in such detail and he had a lot of flashbacks to what happened over the years that made it very easy for me. I got to see what will eventually happen to the character, and he put enough flashbacks in there that I got to see what happened to her over the last 15 years. Let's just say there's more to come.
Well, shit.
Reborn tried to restart the franchise and somehow made things worse. Now, a fourth film did come out in 2022, but Salva was not attached to it in any capacity. You'd think that it would wash out at least some of the blemishes on Jeepers Creepers, but what happened was way worse. How can it be any worse, you might ask? Well, this time around, the production got into legal chaos. Jeepers Creepers Reborn was supposed to be a complete restart of the series, with the 2022 film by Timo Voronsola serving as the first one of a brand new trilogy. Timo directed, the script was credited to writers Jake Seal and Sean Michael Argo, with Screen Media Films handling distribution. High hopes and bigger troubles. The film ended up in legal trouble when Myriad Pictures, who were involved with Jeepers Creepers 2 and 3, filed a lawsuit claiming they still owned the rights to the franchise. According to them, this film was made without their knowledge or involvement, and they even went as far as calling Reborn an unauthorized fan film. Oh, and to add to that, shooting got split into 2 parts due to the COVID pandemic. Despite all that, the movie somehow crawled to a limited theatrical release in the US between September 19th and 21st, 2022, through Screen Media Films and Fathom Events. After that, it headed to video on demand and home release worldwide. So, was all the legal battle worth it? Absolutely no, because Jeepers Creepers Reborn was a catastrophe. Reborn actually starts off on a somewhat promising note. We see an elderly couple being chased down by this beat-up, menacing truck with the "beating you" plate, and they end up spotting the creeper dumping bodies down a chute near an abandoned church. If that sounds familiar, that's because it was. Sounds a bit too familiar, right? But soon, we realize that this whole thing is just a reenactment playing on someone's iPhone in a show called Macabre Mysteries. From there, we follow Lane and Chase, who go back and forth about whether the creeper is even real, with Chase casually mentioning that there were 3 movies made from the legend. For a brief second, it actually feels like the film might lean into this meta angle, and I was sure as hell hopeful, but nope, it drops that idea almost immediately and chooses to go with silly montages and excessive gore. Coming to the creeper, it was a letdown too. Jonathan Breck set such a high standard for the character in the earlier films that it's impossible not to notice the difference here. No disrespect to Jarrod Benjamin, but this version just doesn't hit home, you know? The makeup looks cheap and the performance feels off. In short, the creeper didn't really come off as creepy. The makers do throw in some new gimmicks like a random whistle and some weird crow-related ability, but honestly, none of it actually works. Even when the creeper's truck shows up again, it should have been a cool moment, but nah, and the film looks painfully artificial from start to finish. The obvious green screens and over-the-top CGI made matters worse. Oh, and they even messed up something as simple and iconic as the Jeepers Creepers song. Yes, it actually happened. Instead of using it properly, they threw in this weird replacement track and repeated it on loop. Yeah, it was super annoying. At that point, I wasn't even frustrated anymore, I just gave up. The film was hammered by critics, and at one point was widely reported as sitting at 0% on Rotten Tomatoes, though that score should be checked again because Rotten Tomatoes ratings can change over time. And with the barrage of negative reviews, plus the rights dispute around Reborn, the planned new trilogy appears to have stalled rather than officially marching forward. But fans still believe in the creeper, and that's exactly why they have flooded the internet with fan-made trailers and posters for a fifth movie which can finally meet viewers' expectations. But what we know from public reporting is that Jeepers Creepers Reborn became tangled in a rights dispute, with Myriad Pictures alleging that it had contractual rights tied to later Jeepers Creepers productions and that Reborn moved forward without its involvement. They said, "This case involves the alleged breach of a right of first negotiation and last refusal for worldwide distribution rights to subsequent productions of the horror movie franchise Jeepers Creepers." Cross-defendant Myriad Pictures Incorporated, cross-defendant or plaintiff, alleges in the complaint having a contractual right of first negotiation and last refusal for worldwide distribution rights to subsequent productions. Cross-defendant further alleges that defendants produced and filmed Jeepers Creepers 4 without cross-defendant's knowledge or involvement, even though cross-defendant had been working with defendants to develop the sequels throughout 2018 and 2019. Once the film was shot, defendants purported to extend to cross-defendant a right of last negotiation, which was illusory because defendants had already granted distribution rights to cross-defendant's competitor, Screen Media. But guess what? This is where we need to separate real updates from internet smoke. As of now, there is no reliable trade confirmation that Paramount is making Jeepers Creepers 5, no confirmed title like Jeepers Creepers New Blood, and no verified casting of Gina Phillips or Jenna Ortega. Most of that chatter appears to come from rumor posts, fan pages, and fake trailer culture, so treat it as speculation, not news. It seems like we'll have to wait for a pretty long time for the fifth movie, but in conclusion, what went wrong with the original Jeepers Creepers franchise was a toxic mix of things. Victor Salva's criminal history constantly hanging over the movies, long gaps between sequels, messy rights and financing issues, weak writing, weaker effects, and later entries that never fully understood why the first film worked. The Creeper had the ingredients to become a true modern horror icon, but the franchise kept getting dragged down by controversy, delays, and creative choices that chipped away at the monster's mystique. It sucks because the Creeper still has so much potential to be one of the most frightening supernatural villains out there. Alright guys, that's all for today. My heart breaks a little to realize that Jeepers Creepers failed to be the huge cultural phenomenon it could have been, and for many years, the first film, and depending on who you ask, the second one, remain the only entries that truly capture the franchise's original aura. That being said, I would still turn up if a fifth film ever drops, and once again pray it sets the course of the franchise in the right direction. Do let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you like this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.